You're sitting at your kitchen table staring at your phone. You just opened your banking app to pay the electric bill, and for a second, you honestly think there's a glitch in the software. You blink, you refresh the page, but the number just sits there staring back at you. It's $40 higher than it was last month. And you haven't done anything differently. You haven't been running the AC more, and you haven't bought a new appliance. You just lived your normal baseline life. So you pay it, feeling that familiar heavy knot of anxiety form in your stomach. And then, because you're a responsible adult trying to figure out where the money went, you turn on the evening news. The anchor is talking about geopolitical instability, U.S.-Israel strikes, the Persian Gulf, and global energy markets. They show some blurry drone footage of a burning oil refinery and a map of a tiny strip of water you can barely pronounce. And you just sigh, turn off the TV, and think, this is terrible, but what does a war on the other side of the planet have to do with my electric bill and my grocery budget being completely out of control? It's your friend Karen again, and I spend a ridiculous amount of time trying to figure out why the financial math of everyday life feels so completely rigged against us right now. And right now, in March of 2026, the math is entirely broken. We are all feeling this intense, suffocating squeeze on our wallets. And the frustrating part is that the people on TV are speaking a totally different language than the people trying to pay for a gallon of milk. They talk about macroeconomics. We just want to know why a pack of chicken thighs suddenly costs as much as a steak did 3 years ago. But here's the absolute truth. That blurry map on the news, that tiny little strip of water, that is the exact reason you feel broke this week. There is an invisible, high-tension wire connecting the Persian Gulf directly to your checking account. And right now, that wire is being violently pulled. When you understand how a 21-mile stretch of ocean effectively controls the price of literally everything you touch, eat, and buy, the chaos of the world suddenly makes terrifying sense. More importantly, once you understand the mechanics of the trap, you can actually start building a strategy to survive it. You stop feeling crazy, and you start getting defensive. So today, we are going to translate the geopolitical noise into the actual math of your life. We are going to look at the Strait of Hormuz. We're going to look at the global oil shock that just sent crude past $120 a barrel. And we are going to figure out exactly how to protect your household from the fallout. Grab a cup of coffee, take a deep breath, and let's break this down. To understand why your life just got so unbelievably expensive, we have to start with a quick geography lesson. Don't worry, I promise this isn't going to be a boring lecture. This is about your money. If you look at a map of the Middle East, right between Iran to the north and Oman and the United Arab Emirates to the south, there is a narrow passageway of water connecting the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and eventually out to the open ocean. That passageway is the Strait of Hormuz. It is incredibly small. At its narrowest point, the strait is only about 21 miles wide. For context, you could drive a car across a bridge that length in less than half an hour. It is a geographical bottleneck. But here is the terrifying, mind-bending statistic that dictates the modern world. Roughly 20% of the entire planet's daily petroleum consumption passes through that tiny 21-mile gap every single day. Under normal circumstances, massive supertankers carry about 20 million barrels of crude oil and refined products through that water. It also handles about 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas, LNG. Imagine the global economy as a human body. The Strait of Hormuz is the main artery pumping blood to the brain. If you restrict that artery even a little, the body starts to panic. If you block it completely, the body goes into cardiac arrest. And right now, the global economy is having a massive heart attack. Since the end of February 2026, when the conflict involving the U.S., Israel, and Iran violently escalated, that waterway has become a functional war zone. There are drone strikes, military blockades, and burning refineries on the coast. Now, Put yourself in the shoes of a CEO running a global shipping conglomerate. You own a fleet of supertankers, each one carrying $100 million worth of crude oil. Are you going to sail your massive, highly explosive, multi-million-dollar ship through a 21-mile gap while missiles are flying overhead? No. You are going to drop anchor and wait, and that is exactly what happened. Hundreds of massive oil and product tankers are just sitting still in the Gulf. Shipping insurance premiums have skyrocketed to the point where it is financially ruinous to even attempt the crossing. The Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed for business. When you lock up 20% of the world's oil supply behind a wall of geopolitical fire, the market doesn't just react, it completely loses its mind. We saw this happen instantly. Within days of the strikes, the price of a barrel of Brent crude oil, which is the global benchmark, went from a relatively manageable $75 or $80 and violently spiked. It crossed $100. Then it crossed $110. It hit peaks around $126 a barrel. We haven't seen energy prices like this since the absolute worst moments of the 2008 financial crisis or the immediate aftermath of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But why does that matter to you? You don't buy barrels of Brent crude. You buy unleaded gas for your Honda Civic. Well, oil is a globally traded commodity. Even if the United States produces a lot of its own oil, the price of that oil is set by the global market. When the world suddenly realizes it is missing 20 million barrels a day, panic buying ensues. Countries in Europe and Asia that rely heavily on Middle Eastern imports start aggressively outbidding each other for whatever oil is available from other sources. That massive, desperate surge in demand drags the price of all oil up, no matter where it comes from. So, within 48 to 72 hours of a military strike happening 6,000 miles away, the digital numbers on the sign at your local gas station tick up. They go up by 20 cents, then 50 cents, then $1 a gallon. Suddenly, your commute to work, which used to cost you $40 a week, now costs you $65. If you live in the suburbs and you have to drive your kids to school, drive to your office, and drive to the grocery store, you are suddenly bleeding an extra $100 to $150 a month just for the privilege of moving your physical body around your town. That is the first, most obvious way the Strait of Hormuz drains your bank account. It acts as a direct, unavoidable tax on your mobility. But honestly, the price at the pump is just the tip of the iceberg. The real financial devastation is happening quietly in the background to every single thing you buy. We have this comforting, deeply flawed illusion that we live in a local economy. You go to your local big box store, you buy a t-shirt, a bottle of laundry detergent, and some apples, and you think, well, I bought this here in my town, so global events shouldn't affect it. But the modern world is a miracle of logistics, and logistics run exclusively on fossil fuels. Let's look at that bottle of laundry detergent. First of all, the plastic bottle itself is made from petrochemicals, which are derived directly from crude oil. When oil hits $126 a barrel, the raw material cost of manufacturing every piece of plastic packaging on Earth skyrockets. Second, the detergent has to be manufactured in a massive industrial facility that uses megawatts of electricity heavily generated by natural gas and coal. Third, and most importantly, that heavy, liquid-filled plastic bottle has to be moved from a factory to a regional warehouse to the shelf at your local store. How does it get there? It goes on an 18-wheeler truck, or a freight train, or a massive cargo ship. All of those machines burn diesel fuel. Diesel is the lifeblood of the global supply chain. When the price of crude oil explodes because the Strait of Hormuz is blocked, the price of commercial diesel fuel explodes right along with it. Now, do you think the massive transportation companies are just going to absorb that extra fuel cost out of the goodness of their hearts? Of course not. They slap what is called a fuel surcharge on every single pallet of goods they move. The trucking company charges the distributor more, the distributor charges the grocery store more, and the grocery store, looking at their shrinking profit margins, takes out a little pricing gun and raises the retail price of your laundry detergent from $12.99 to $15.49. You are not just paying for soap, you are paying a geopolitical diesel tax on the transportation of that soap. This applies to literally everything physical in your life. It applies to your clothes, your electronics, your furniture, and most terrifyingly, your food. Because the cargo ships that usually take the shortcut through the Middle East are now terrified of being attacked, they are rerouting around the entire continent of Africa. That adds weeks to the journey and burns millions of extra gallons of fuel. So when you walk through the aisles of the store and you feel like you're losing your mind because a box of crackers is suddenly $2 more expensive, you're not crazy. You're just paying the freight bill for a completely broken, incredibly fragile global supply chain. Okay, so we've covered fuel and plastic, but there is a much stealthier, much more dangerous layer to this crisis, and it is the reason why your grocery bill is going to stay high for a very, very long time, even if the shooting stops tomorrow. Remember earlier when I mentioned that 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas, LNG, passes through the Strait of Hormuz? Natural gas is the silent partner in this economic disaster. When the strait closed, natural gas prices in Europe and Asia went absolutely parabolic. And while you might think, well, I don't use natural gas to heat my home, so I'm fine, you are missing the most critical use of natural gas on the planet. We eat it. I know that sounds weird, but stay with me. Modern commercial agriculture, the system that produces the massive amounts of cheap food required to feed 8 billion people, relies entirely on synthetic nitrogen fertilizer. Without it, crop yields plummet, and we simply do not have enough wheat, corn, and soy to go around. Do you know what the primary ingredient is in the chemical process used to make nitrogen fertilizer? Natural gas. When the price of natural gas spikes, the cost to manufacture fertilizer doubles or triples almost overnight. Fertilizer plants simply shut down because they cannot afford the energy required to run their machines. This creates a terrifying domino effect. The farmer, looking at the upcoming planting season, realizes that the fertilizer he needs to grow his corn has just tripled in price. He can't afford it. So he either plants fewer acres or he uses less fertilizer, which means the land produces far less corn. A few months later, at harvest time, there is a massive shortage of corn on the market. Because supply is low and demand is the same, the price of corn shoots up. Now, who eats the most corn? We do, in the form of processed foods, but mostly livestock eat it. Corn and soy are the foundational feed for the cattle, pigs, and chickens that eventually become the meat in your grocery store. When the farmer's feed costs explode, the price of ground beef, chicken breasts, and milk explodes right behind it. This is the fertilizer time bomb. The geopolitical shock happening right now in the Strait of Hormuz is baking catastrophic food inflation into the system for the next 6 to 12 months. The high prices you are seeing at the store today are mostly just from the diesel surcharges. The real pain, the actual shortage of cheap agricultural commodities, hasn't even fully hit the retail shelves yet. When you understand this, you stop wondering why life is so expensive, and you start wondering how it isn't even more expensive. Now, if you watch the news, you might have seen some politicians or agency heads trying to calm everyone down. Last week, the International Energy Agency, the IEA, announced they were going to release nearly 400 million barrels of crude oil from the emergency strategic reserves of their member nations. They get on TV, they use very serious, reassuring voices, and they say, "Do not panic. We are injecting massive amounts of supply into the market to stabilize prices and protect the consumer." And you, sitting at home, might feel a brief moment of relief. You think, oh good, the adults are in charge, the government is fixing it, gas prices will come back down next week. I need you to completely rid yourself of this illusion. Releasing oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is the economic equivalent of putting a Band-Aid on a severed artery. Yes, 400 million barrels sounds like an absolutely staggering amount of oil. It sounds like an ocean. But let's do the math. The world consumes roughly 100 million barrels of oil every single day. A 400 million barrel release is exactly 4 days worth of global supply. When the Strait of Hormuz is blocked, we're losing access to 20 million barrels a day. The strategic reserve release just barely covers the shortfall for a few weeks. It is a temporary accounting trick designed to calm the stock market and prevent immediate society collapsing panic. It does absolutely nothing to fix the underlying structural reality that a massive percentage of the world's energy infrastructure is currently sitting idle or on fire. The reserves are finite. They will run out. And when they do, if the strait is still closed, the price of oil will violently correct upward again. You cannot rely on the government to subsidize the cost of your commute indefinitely. They simply do not have the physical resources to do it. You have to assume that energy prices and the resulting inflation on all your goods are going to remain punishingly high for the foreseeable future. Okay, so we have established that the costs of fuel, plastic, shipping, and fertilizer are legitimately skyrocketing because of the war. That is the raw math of the supply chain. But there is a deeply cynical, psychological layer to this crisis that we have to talk about, because corporations are not just passing their higher costs on to you. They are actively exploiting your fear to enrich their shareholders. I call it greedflation, and right now we are seeing the most aggressive version of it in modern history. Here is how the corporate game is played. The executives running a massive multinational consumer goods company watch the same news you do. They see the headlines about the Strait of Hormuz. They know that you, the consumer, are currently terrified about inflation. They know you expect prices to go up. So they look at their spreadsheets. Let's say the spike in diesel and plastic actually raises their cost to produce a box of trash bags by 6%. Do they raise the retail price of the trash bags by 6% to cover their costs? Absolutely not. They raise the price by 15%. They use the very real, very scary geopolitical crisis as a smokescreen to artificially inflate their profit margins. They know that if you get angry and complain about the price of the trash bags, they can just point a finger at the Middle East, shrug their shoulders, and say, "What can we do? The supply chain is broken. Oil is at $126. We are victims here too." They have the ultimate alibi. Meanwhile, if you go read their quarterly earnings reports, which I do because I'm apparently a masochist, they are not acting like victims. They are boasting to their Wall Street investors about their robust pricing power and their expanded margins. They are bragging about how easily they were able to pass price hikes onto the consumer without losing sales volume. They are reporting record-breaking net profits during the exact same quarter that you are trying to figure out if you can afford to put your kids in swimming lessons. This is the psychological warfare of the modern economy. They know you're exhausted. They know you're distracted by the horrific images on the news, and they are using that cognitive overload to quietly pick your pocket at the cash register. You are not just paying for the war. You are paying for their stock buybacks. So what do we do? Honestly, it is incredibly easy to look at all of this data, the blocked strait, the fertilizer time bomb, the corporate greedflation, and just fall into absolute despair. It feels like you are a tiny little boat in a massive ocean storm, and you have absolutely no control over the waves. And it is true, you cannot control the waves. You cannot fix the Strait of Hormuz. You cannot negotiate global peace treaties. You cannot command a CEO to lower the price of your laundry detergent. But you do have absolute, unquestionable control over your own boat. You control where your money goes. And right now, you have to transition from being a passive consumer to being a highly defensive financial operator. Here is the exact strategy for surviving this crisis. First, you must sever your brand loyalty. Right now, brand loyalty is a luxury tax you cannot afford to pay. The major name brands are the ones aggressively pushing the greedflation narrative because they believe their marketing makes them immune to consumer pushback. You have to break the habit. Next time you go to the store, I want you to actively force yourself to buy the generic store brand version of every single packaged good you put in your cart: cereal, cleaning supplies, paper goods, canned vegetables. In almost every case, the generic product is manufactured in the exact same facility as the premium brand. It is the exact same chemical composition, just poured in a cheaper, less flashy bottle. By switching to generics, you instantly bypass the corporate pricing power premium and slash 15 to 20% off your grocery bill. Second, the commuter's audit. With gas prices at crisis levels, your car is currently a wealth-destroying machine. You cannot drive casually anymore. Every time you turn the key, you are burning highly taxed capital. You need to ruthlessly audit your driving. Can you carpool to work? Can you consolidate your 4 random weekly errands into one single highly efficient trip on Saturday morning? If you work an office job, can you use the current economic crisis as leverage to negotiate 1 or 2 remote work days a week with your boss? Treat the gas in your tank like it is liquid gold, because right now, it effectively is. Third, build the defensive pantry. Beat the fertilizer bomb. Remember the fertilizer time bomb we talked about? The massive food inflation that is coming in the next 6 to 12 months? You need to prepare for it now, while prices, although high, are still lower than they will be. I'm not telling you to panic buy or hoard toilet paper. I'm telling you to build a rational, rolling inventory of dry goods. Every time you go to the store, spend an extra $10 or $15 on shelf-stable staples that rely heavily on agriculture: flour, rice, dried beans, pasta, and cooking oils. Buy them now at today's prices and put them in the back of your pantry. You're essentially creating a 3-month buffer between your kitchen table and the global supply chain. When the grain shortages hit later this year and the price of pasta doubles, you won't care, because you'll be eating the pasta you bought months ago at a discount. Fourth, aggressive debt triage. Because inflation is raging again due to this oil shock, the Federal Reserve is not going to lower interest rates anytime soon. In fact, borrowing money is going to remain incredibly expensive. If you have a balance on a credit card at 24% interest, that is a financial emergency. The high baseline cost of living is already draining your cash. You cannot afford to also bleed out via massive interest payments to a bank. You need to go through your budget this weekend and completely slash your discretionary spending. Cancel the subscriptions, stop eating at restaurants, pause your automated investing if you absolutely have to. Take every single spare dollar you can find and throw it at that high-interest debt. You have to lower your monthly minimum obligations to give yourself the agility to survive the higher grocery bills. I know this is heavy. I really do. It is profoundly exhausting to realize that you can do everything right. You can work hard, try to stick to a budget, try to be responsible, and still feel like you are getting crushed by events happening thousands of miles away. It is completely okay to stand at the gas pump, look at the total, and feel a deep, burning sense of anger. You have every right to be frustrated. The system is incredibly fragile, and whenever it breaks, it is always the middle class that is expected to absorb the shock. But you cannot let that anger paralyze you, because the system is banking on your paralysis. They want you to just accept the higher prices, swipe your credit card, and go further into debt just to maintain your baseline existence. You have to refuse to play that game. You have the knowledge now. You know exactly why the prices are going up. You know about the diesel tax, the fertilizer bomb, and the corporate smokescreen. You are no longer in the dark. And because you aren't in the dark, you can fight back. You can change your habits. You can guard your money fiercely. You can look at the chaos of the global economy, draw a firm line around your own household, and say, "Not today. You are not taking my peace of mind."